So if you're enjoying this program, we hope you'll support us. If you haven't yet had the chance to contribute, you can help by making a donation now. You can do so via the donations button on the tour's homepage at bringingbacktheNatives.net, on the tour's GoFundMe page, or you can mail in a check. The tour's address is under Contact Us on the website. So we're going to go now to Ed Ellebracht's garden in Fremont. And I'm just going to show you the before photo of Ed's shared driveway strip and a few of the after photos. I have to say, this was such a beautiful garden. I just loved seeing this garden. Ed is not a garden designer, though you wouldn't know it to see what he has done. Ed will be showing us two separate videos, one about his native meadow and the other about the sidewalk strip where rainwater is kept on site. So let me stop sharing and we'll go now to Ed. Hello, Ed. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing so well, Kathy. Nice to see you again. Nice
to see you as well. Thank you for all your hard work on the videos. I know it's not easy to do this.
I'm not very good at it, and it's a little tough when you don't do it for a long time and try again.
No, I think you did a marvelous job. So I think that, let me ask you, what prompted you to change from your lawn? I didn't show a photo of your original front garden because I know you have one in the video. What prompted you to change from the lawn that was there to the meadow that you installed?
Oh, well, my front yard was a catastrophe. It was beyond awful. And I, had invasive weeds coming in from my neighbors. I, had to do something, and was getting into garden after I retired, and was reading American Meadows book. Thought that'd be really fun to do, and I'd gone on your tour so many times that I drew a lot of inspiration from that and kind of melded that together eventually. There were some stops and starts, and I did it all myself, which definitely filled my days. But it is, someone earlier today mentioned how nice it is when you are very integrated with the design and the plants, and it really does help you a lot to understand it. I literally spend time every day in my garden just walking around, and it's not lost time, but sometimes it's an hour more. There's so many beautiful things, and I just can't recommend it enough. When you go from the grass to that living landscape, it's really something.
It is. Well, let's go now and take a look at your first video.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the second video.
Hi, this is.
Okay, let's see how we can.
Should say Meadow Garden.
Okay, let us try. Give me one quick second. That's the one I had listed as your first video. So let me.
Sorry to trip you up there, Zarina.
It's okay. Is this the second one that you sent me this morning, or is it a different second one?
The first video is labeled Meadow Garden, and this is the one this one you just showed is the improved second video that I sent you today.
Got it. Okay, I think I have found it. One. Cool. Yep, I have found that one. One moment, please. There we go. Does that look right?
Hi, good morning. I'm Ed Ellebracht. This brief video will talk about my meadow garden, which is located in Kimber Park, the Kimber Park neighborhood in Fremont, California. It's the east side of Fremont, which is part of Northern California, the Bay Area, basically. This is a pretty unique garden in a couple ways. Probably the first element is that it's a DIY meadow garden. I based this meadow garden on information I found in John Greenlee's American Meadows book. So it's largely non-native when I built it, and had a low meadow and a high meadow and a lot of grasses. I've changed it since then to be much more native, and but that original backbone is still in here, and you'll see the effect, I think. The second unique thing about this garden is that the side yard garden of a shared strip of land that with my neighbor just to the north of me is a working watershed garden, and I'll talk more about that later, but it's actually very high function, and it's really fun how that worked out. Okay, turning towards the meadow, you can see a flagstone patio adjacent to the house with a stone wall and a short concrete wall on the near side. Adjacent to that is the beginning of the meadow, and there's a large inflorescence of soap plant right there in the foreground, and behind that is a beautiful Kurtzadnik ceanothus. We'll explore that a little more later. Now the meadow itself is coming into view, and it's pretty high right now. Normally I would push mower a path on that, but it's a sedge meadow primarily. There is a nice amount of Lippia here in the foreground that will be more dominant later in the year. To the right of the meadow, well, formerly where there was a high meadow, is now mostly shrubs and perennials, and in the foreground of the shrubs you can see a Salvia brandigii. It's a little past bloom, but that is a great plant. It blooms very early, and the bees like to get started on that one in the season. There's that flagstone path that leads to the street, and we'll be heading down that in a little bit. To the right of the flagstone path is the continuation of the meadow. In the background you can see some more of the large bunching grasses. There's another blooming soap plant in the foreground on the left-hand side, and there's a couple flowering dicks also in the very foreground. And on the extreme right-hand side is a really nice hybrid sage starlight. It's a cross between Salvia apiana and Salvia mellifera. Finally, in the foreground you can see one of the bunching grasses. It's a little small right now, but that's Festuca marii, the Atlas fescue. Okay, let's head off into that meadow and past the Kurtzadnik ceanothus, and there's a big bunch of Phacelia bullanderi. This year's been a great year for the Phacelia bullanderi, and it's really grown into quite a large patch. It's worth returning to, and we'll do that in a little bit. In the garden there's over 15 different sages, a dozen manzanitas, more than half a dozen ceanothus, and a lot of other things, so it's really too much to go into in great detail, so we're just going to hit some of the highlights. As you come from the street, there's a flagstone curb, basically a flagstone path that leads up to the main entrance. Each side of the path is Arctostapholis verdissimus white cloud, and you can see there's a mixture of sages, some succulents, and kind of a wall of manzanita here. There's Howard McMinn. There's a couple of Louis Edmonds here that are quite upright. There's a Mount Diablo manzanita right here. There's Salvia leucantha Santa Barbara, which is a nice dwarfing sage. So at the corner we have Eriogonum fasciculatum and Eriogonum arborescens mixed in with some succulents. There's Monardella Russian River here. I use that quite a bit. It's really nice. It's a great smell. Beautiful white flowering penstemon. Woolly blue curls in front there, and this really, really super nice Salvia melissadora. It's really very large. Flowers year-round. Super attractive, especially to carpenter bees. At the south edge of the garden, deserts are actually pretty tough here. It's very windy most of the day, has a really tough exposure, a lot of reflected heat. So it's really tough on a lot of plants, but I've learned over time that these natives can really do well here. This bee's bliss has no problem with this very desiccating wind. And there's a wonderful remote blue ceanothus, kind of past its main bloom, but it's stunningly beautiful. You can see some of it's going to fruit. There's Pacific Mist, several different Arctostapholis, Salvia apiana compact form, and really one of my very favorite plants here is this Arctostapholis Pallida, which is a rare endangered form. I got this plant from Tilden, and it is very, very beautiful in flower and has these very large fruit berries. You can see there, hopefully. Absolutely stunning.
One moment, please. The video
Very large.
got stuck. I'm
Fruit.
just seeing if I can fix it.
Really been great this year.
There we go.
That woodland Phacelia that's blooming
Thank
so
you,
well.
everybody, for your patience. I think that's where we were. Oh, and it's just getting stuck there again. I'm going to scoot us forward just a little bit. There we go.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I brought you
everybody.
back to the meadow and to that woodland Phacelia that's blooming so well this year. You can see it's developed into a pretty large patch. What's really been great this year are just the number of native bee species and sheer quantity of bees on the Phacelia. They vary in intensity during the day, during the middle of the day. You really get a lot of different species. Towards the beginning and end of the day, it's typically the bumblebees that are out. They seem to work better when things are a little cooler. But it's really been astounding, and I wanted to share it with you here. Okay, here we are out in the garden, and I wanted to come in close on this beautiful Cianothus so you can see all the wildlife that's on it right now. It's pretty much in full bloom here. It's a great time to come in. I'll try and be quiet, just pan around so you can see what's happening. So right now, I'm not really seeing anything except bumblebees. I have seen many other different native bees here at different times, but this day, this time of day, it's almost all bumblebees. Stunning. I wanted to end with some photos I've taken from my garden. I feel like I've made a lot of strides towards accomplishing what Doug Tallamy has set forth in his national park in everybody's yard, and I hope these can provide some inspiration or maybe just some joy from looking at the pretty pictures. In any case, please enjoy them. Here's a teddy bear, male Carpenter Valley bee, about 1.5 inches long, with amazing green eyes, approaching a Salvia melissadora. This is a tiny hairy belly bee, I think anyway, on Salvia brandigii. Bumblebees love this native California Phacelia, the caterpillar Phacelia. Here's a Bembic stinger wasp, nectaring on Lipia. They're super fast with huge eyes and extremely alert, and they capture flies for their young.
The red admiral butterflies love the white cloud manzanitas. Since they seem to fly very early, the manzanitas are in bloom, providing the much-needed nectar. This gorgeous little skipper is feeding from a hybrid blue curl's Midnight Magic, which blooms over a much longer period than the straight species. Here are a pair of carpenter bees nectaring while mating on Salvia melissadora, which is also known as the grape-scented sage. This yellow-faced bumblebee was snoozing on this white cloud manzanita bloom. This tiny carpenter bee, probably Serotina species, is feeding on seaside daisy. Here's a pipevine swallowtail on that Salvia brandigii. So far this year, this has been the butterfly I've seen most in my garden. Pipevine caterpillars on my Dutchman's pipevine from last year. Yay! Tiny male metallic green bee on woodland phacelia. Here's a slender salamander I found under a pot. This California toad lives under the Salvia melissadora. The first toad I remember seeing in 40 years in California was in my yard. This baby sharp-tailed snake somehow snuck into my house under our front door. I'm always amazed at the incredible beauty of nature around us. This friendly little baby alligator lizard was rescued from my garage. Here's an anise hummingbird on Salvia melissadora. I see several hummingbirds daily. Here's a migratory cedar waxwing munching on my neighbor's 40-year-old Texas privet. Soon my neighbors will be big enough to feed the migrators the healthy berries these birds really need. Okay, songbirds, you better watch out for the neighborhood Cooper's hawk. The presence of the top predator makes me think the food web is working here. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.
Oh, Ed, that was terrific. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I love the wildlife photos at the end, and I'm really envious that you saw a toad.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it kind of blows my mind. There seem to be several of them. And I find them from time to time throughout the year, so they're living here. Yeah, I think a meadow with a lot of very gravelly soil seems to help, and it's irrigated. I should have mentioned that at some point. Yeah, I think that helps a lot.
What we found, we drew lizards when we had a wood pile, and also when I buried logs partway in the soil and just left them there to rot. Then we saw newts and salamanders. Otherwise, we've not really had a lot of amphibians or reptiles here. I'm sorry to have to say, but we recently saw a ring-necked snake. And
Oh, I love ring-necked snakes.
yeah, it's really fun. It was really exciting to see them.
Yeah.
So Ed, somebody said award-winning transformation. Great job. I agree. The bird song in your video was beautiful. Someone asked about the national park in every garden. Do you want to just talk about that for a moment? Like, whose idea was it? And
Yeah, I mean, you actually handed me a softball question at the beginning talking about where I drew my inspiration. I mean, it's Doug Tallamy. Come on, this guy. He's my real inspiration. I just got his book today, well, actually yesterday. I just opened it while this was playing. I'm pretty excited. It's Doug Tallamy. I went to Master Gardener Symposium with his talk way back about the time I was doing my meadow, and it absolutely blew my mind. Was a real transformation in my thought process, and it is, I could go on for hours, but just briefly, I've been taking horticultural classes for actually over 5 years, and I've seen many extremely well-designed and beautiful gardens in the Bay Area. They are beautiful. They have a lot of wonderful plants, but they just can't compare to a living garden. And it's not even close. I mean, you see all those bees, you see the actual wildlife, what are we talking about? You know, it's not even close.
Let me
So-
say that Doug Tallamy, if you are interested, you can contact Orinda Books. And if you purchase any of Doug Tallamy's books, they're offering a fundraiser for the garden tour. He's got 3 books out now, maybe 4, I think, and he's just fantastic. So he spoke on April the 25th. His talk is up on the tour's YouTube page. He spoke at last year's virtual tour, and you can see his other talk there as well. But let's go on now and see Ed's second video, which is on the working watershed. I'm so excited about this.
Hi, this is the second video for the Bringing Back the Natives tour, and this video will talk about the watershed garden that I've installed in the strip of land that I share with my neighbor to the north. This was a really fun project for me, and this strip of land, as you'll see in the before photos, was kind of unused. There were some shrubs on it, was not very attractive, and had a couple of large liquid amber styraciflua trees on it, pretty common sweet gums. These trees were not really good trees to keep. They were beginning to impinge on the pavement, and I was advised by an arborist that they should probably come out. This is an actual working watershed garden. There was a sump pump that redirected water from a low area in my backyard to the curb, and I've taken that same pipe and redirected to the head of this strip of land, and it actually flows in the wintertime. There's quite a bit of water multiplication. If we get an inch of rain, that strip, especially the forward portion of it, will get, it's hard to know for sure, but 10, might be a 10x multiplier, could be more depending upon how much water is coming from my neighbor's property uphill from me. So that can actually be really fun to watch work, and there's be a little video here on that. I've arranged this garden in more or less zones of increasing aridity, if that makes any sense to you. Hopefully it does. So it's very dry and desiccating here. There's a lot of reflected light, dry winds. In basically all summer, every afternoon, the winds will kick up, and there's just very hot conditions. I've had to learned over time how to protect some of the plants from this extra heat. It's turned out very well. It's really exceeded my expectations, and I tend to spend time in it every day, just seeing what's going on. But you'll see all that in a moment. I hope you enjoy it.
Here's the view of the watershed garden from the street, and we're going to walk right up this dry riverbed. There's succulent gardens to the left and right. On the right-hand side is my yard, and the left-hand side is my neighbor's yard. Immediately behind these succulent gardens are 2 chaparral areas, which are raised bed behind a short stone wall full of rocky, gravelly soil, and a lot of manzanitas, and that's where most of the roots are. Also, epilobium, UC hybrid right there, that silver plant. The left-hand side is Aerophyllum lanatum siskiyou, beautiful. There's some monardella, and there's the first of 2 Quercus scariana Oregon oaks, pretty small still. All right, we're moving forward. Left-hand side, Dr. Hurd manzanita. Right-hand side, Xerxes occidentalis. And straight ahead, Berberis navinii. Getting into the oak woodland area, left-hand side is coyote bush and some Prunus obliquifolia. We've gone by the second Quercus, and there's another Dr. Hurd manzanita. And here at the end, you can see a shade garden with elderberry, carpentaria, and other plants. We're looking at the small water feature at the end of the watershed garden, and I'm going to try and activate it here in a moment. You can see the white PVC is where the sump pump from the side yard will actually send the water back this way. There it goes. The water is splashing into the plastic liner, and it's also going to the rocks behind it. kind of fun. During the rainy season, rainwater that would have been directed by the sump pump to the gutter and then to the sewer is sent here, and where it percolates down and nourishes all these the oaks and prunus and other native plants here that seem to really like it. Okay, we've stepped back to provide an overview of the shared strip garden. The shaded garden under the Rosia Banksia begins on the right-hand side. This leads to an oak woodland environment, which is noticeably cooler even on hot, windy days. This woodland will transition to a chaparral garden, which has a rocky mulch, where most of the manzanita and buckwheats are located. Finally, on the left-hand side, nearest the street, is an arid, dry garden with succulents and a few natives, including a small Aesculus californica, the California. If you look at the plant list for my garden, you'll see that there's no way to talk about most of them. There's just too many. So let's take a look at some of the more noteworthy plants. In particular, I can recommend these three following keystone natives very highly. First off, although hard to see, there's a small brewer's oak at the shade line. It's a wonderful small native oak suitable for virtually any size garden, and it has a nice fall foliage display. It hosts 270 different Lepidoptera species, and these California oaks are super powerful ecosystem benefactors. The next plant we'll look at is the Catalina cherry. It's a very tough and adaptable plant, and it can serve as a sheared shrub, a beautiful evergreen screen, which it's doing here, or even a tree depending on how it's pruned. Also, by the way, it hosts 246 different Lepidoptera species. Finally, there's this prostrate coyote bush. It's very, very tough, low growing, and a host for 37 Lepidoptera. Another great plant in this watershed garden is this pretty little Cercis occidentalis cultivar Claremont, the western redbud. It's deciduous, and it is a host of a number of Lepidoptera, 10 or so. What's really fun to see is the leafcutter bees making small circular cuts in the leaves, and they seem to prefer this quite a bit to the eastern redbud, which is also located nearby. There are more than 10 different species of buckwheats in my garden, and they really do form the backbone for the late summer garden. They're very floriferous, and perhaps my favorite is the Eriogonum arborescens, the Santa Cruz Island buckwheat. It's beautiful, upright, extremely attractive to a lot of insects, and these buckwheats are host plants to more than 30 different Lepidoptera and are incredibly attractive to many insects. Really fun to have. Well, it looks like I have time for maybe one more plant on this garden, and the one I've chosen is the desert lavender, Candia emorii. This is a beast. It has been saving a lot of my plants, and I've been using it as a nurse plant to help get the manzanita and ceanothus established. It's very attractive to bees, has a long flowering period. It's a host plant for the gray hair-streaked butterfly, which is one of my favorite little blue butterflies. And another thing I like about this plant is that I have been able to really beat it up, just cut it back very hard. It just acts as a great wind screen for the chaparral garden on the southern side. Let's take a couple minutes to see some of the insects that have visited this garden. Here's starting off with a tiny little carpenter bee, Seratina, on that desert lavender. That flower is only about a 1/4 inch wide. Here's a much larger carpenter bee on a Pozo Blue Salvia. Here's another visitor to the Pozo Blue, a giant swallowtail butterfly, really gorgeous. One of my favorite little butterflies, the California hairstreak, is shown here on a inflorescence of Eriogonum arborescens. You can see it's quite a beautiful shrub. Here's a small white crab spider that ambushed an unlucky fly on an Eriogonum latifolium inflorescens. Shortly thereafter, a European wasp stops by and wants that fly, but in the end, the spider was able to keep it. Let's end with a slow-mo video of a yellow-faced bumblebee on Carpenter, Californica, the bush anemone. Thanks for watching my videos, and just a quick reminder that plant choice really does matter. These insects are in my garden because of the native plants that we're using.
Well, that was great, Ed. Thank you so much. So it was lovely to finally have had you on the tour. I pursued you for years and between college graduations and whatnot. So hopefully we'll have you in real life next year.
Yeah, that would be great. And I just want to say thanks for having me on this. I feel like a little fish among all these great big producers. And also, I don't think I said this, but I am reading this book right now, this Tending the Wild. What a great book. I would recommend that for all you enthusiasts out there.
All right. So I'm going to answer one question. Yes, Ed's is on a city lot in Fremont. He's not out in the middle of nowhere. He's surrounded, I know, on a street full of lawns. So he's just kind of created an oasis for wildlife with the plants that he's chosen to put in.
Yeah, it's probably more correct maybe to say that I'm adjacent to some wild areas. I'm kind of at the very near the foot of the hills. So you know, there is access for wildlife. I often see the bees just fly off to that area. You know, so they may be nesting. They probably are nesting there. So I do have, I think I get more exposure than maybe someone in the middle of Berkeley.
Okay. Well, Ed, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your hard work with your garden and being with us today and on those videos. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying this, Kathy. Thanks so much for all your effort. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.